Okay, hi guys, and welcome to today's show. Today, another episode of my top 5 loves and hates, and this time we're talking about a watch that I've owned many times, very many different versions of this watch, and that is, of course, and also my wristwatch check, the Omega Speedmaster Reduced. This particular version is the Schumacher Special Edition, or the Schumi as I've come to nickname it, with a special kind of Ferrari red and orange highlights on the dial, and of course signed commemorating the famous Ferrari driver. At the time he was driving for Ferrari, Michael Schumacher, of course. So let's roll the intro and get into today's video. Start with my top 10 loves of this watch, and number one has got to be its design. Well, of course it shares its DNA with the Speedmaster, the professional, the iconic one. It has so many similarities and some subtle differences which we'll get into later on, but essentially you do get the same feeling as the Speedmaster. And I should point out, I have owned the professional version, the full-size 42mm manual wind. I owned it first, and then it was too big for me. I went with my first reduced, and I've kind of never looked back. I love the curves of the case, the lugs, that UFO shape to the crystal, the tachymeter, of course. All these things that just identify immediately as a Speedmaster is everything I love about it. The contrasting crisp white details with the black dial, although this particular version has a little bit more color to it. Distortion you get with the Hesselite version, just so retro, just so indicative of its age. I just love it. It has a charm, it's a classic design, so undoubtedly the first love of this watch has got to be its design. Number two, for me, I love the compact size and scale of the Reduced. As I said, I started off with the professional version. Now, it's all relative. If you have larger wrists, then by all means go with the professional. But for me, this suits my scale, much more comfortable. It doesn't overhang. It complements my wrist perfectly. The diameter is 38mm on the Reduced. Now, a common thing I hear amongst collectors, watch collectors, is the Speedmaster Reduced is simply a Speedmaster for those who can't afford the real thing. It is a real Speedmaster. It says Speedmaster on the dial. It's made by Omega, so to me, it's a real Speedmaster. But what they mean is they think it's a cop-out or a kind of settling because it is obviously more affordable than the professional. Well, like I said, I've had the professional and I went back to this version. I've also had the first Omega in space, and I went again back to this version. If the smaller size suits you, then that's what should determine which one you go for. It would be ridiculous for me with my small wrists to own the 42mm professional, and it would just look silly. And I really like the fact that Omega made this available, so you know you can still enjoy Speedmaster if you have a smaller wrist, which I think is fantastic. Okay, so my third love of this watch, and this is very controversial. Well, it's not that controversial, but I actually really love this movement. I really love the fact there's an automatic version of the Speedmaster. When I had the Speedmaster, I'm just not one for manual wind. I love manual wind watches, don't get me wrong, but I often forgot to wind it. And I'm just so used to automatic watches. So for me, the automatic option is just a little bit more practical. Now there's some things I don't like about the movement, which we'll get into later. So inside we have the Omega 3220 caliber movement. This of course is based on the ETA 2890-A2. Attached we have the Debris de Poids 2020 chronograph module. It has a 40-hour power reserve, a staggering 46 joules in total, and operates at 28,800 vibrations an hour. And what I love about this movement is, unlike the 1861 manual wind that has a lateral clutch, this one has a vertical clutch. So you get that instantaneous when you click stop and start on the pusher, it's instantaneous. Something kind of bugged me a little bit about having the manual wind versions. It doesn't have that jerky start and stop, which I really do appreciate. And it actually is more accurate if you're timing things, because it's immediate. Now there is a bit of a myth surrounding this movement that it is very costly and difficult to service. Well, actually, the truth is, a well-trained watchmaker should be able to service the Debris de Poids module as well. It's also been suggested that the spare parts are difficult to get a hold of, but if you compare it to trying to find or source parts for a 321 movement, it's actually more affordable and easier to get a hold of. It really depends on your watchmaker. If you have a really trained, experienced, talented watchmaker, then it should not be a problem. Certainly a little bit more expensive than the 7750, obviously, because those are really kind of watchmaker's favorite. And also, compared to the 7750, it's a lot slimmer, which lends for a more comfortable watch. Something that don't get me wrong, I adore my 7750 chronographs, but it is a tall movement. This is pretty slender for an automatic chronograph. And lastly, most importantly, it's robust, reliable, and I find it very accurate. Okay, so the movement was my third thing I love about this watch. What is my fourth? Well, it's got to do with the variation within the Speedmaster reduced range. There are so many really cool versions. There's the polar white dial, which is just gorgeous, and I love the contrast with the black tachymeter. Gorgeous. There's also a panda version. There's a two-tone as well, which I really do like. I don't often like two-tone, but the two-tone is really cool. And then of course there's a solid gold version, which I just think in this smaller size, solid gold Speedmaster, I just think it's really cool. I don't often like solid gold watches, but for some reason this one, maybe because of its more refined, smaller scale, I just think it's gorgeous. Not to mention the 2006 version, the 3539 with all the upgrades, the sapphire glass as well, the improved water resistance. They took away the numerals on the dial of the 3510. They also gave it a push button clasp. So there's more modern versions out there. They are really expensive. The 3539 is costly, but all those upgrades kind of makes it worth it. It's certainly even more of a tool watch because it's just so much more robust. And finally, of course, there's versions like mine, special editions, limited racing editions, which kind of harken back to the initial use or what the Speedmaster was originally designed for, which of course is a racing watch. I really think these limited editions like the Schumacher here are going to be very sought after in the future by collectors, because obviously they're a little bit more rare, the fun use of colors, they come in these quirky cases, and also the events they commemorate, like Formula 1 championships. There's a Daytona version as well. I love the variation you can get with the Speedmaster, and don't get me wrong, there's incredible variation you can get with the larger Speedmasters. I do feel on the used market you can buy some really cool variety. And talking of variety, I think that's something we should mention about the watch itself. It is incredibly versatile. Put it on a NATO, put it on a leather strap, put it on a mesh bracelet. It just goes with anything. Especially the 3510 reduced is incredibly versatile. The monochromatic color scheme just lends itself instantly to any kind of strap, even a rubber strap, even, you know, you name it, it works. It really does. Color wise, texture wise, when you have it on a leather strap, it's kind of dressy, you know. So not only versatility in the variation of different types of reduced you can get, but also in itself of how you can wear it. Okay, so variety and versatility was my fourth point. Number 5 has got to be its affordability. It's always going to be in the shadows of its more prestigious, famous, moon-going bigger brother, right? What that means is it ensures it will always be slightly cheaper or significantly cheaper than the professional. Now, prices have risen quite a bit in the last couple of years, and not really helped by the fact that I've been you know, pontificating about their great value and all the rest of it, but you can still find them for an absolute steal on the used market. When I first got mine reduced, I think I paid about 1,100, just over 1,000. These days they're going for about, you know, the $2,000 mark, maybe a little bit more for a limited special edition like this. And always check out the Japanese market especially. They are very popular, the reduced over there specifically. I've bought a few reduced from there, and the great thing about dealing with Japanese market is not only are they a little bit cheaper, they do business generally very well. They're very professional about how they list the watch. They go into incredible detail about the condition. That is always a sweet spot. Maybe if you're watching this years in the future, maybe the heyday will be over, but right now it still is a sweet spot in the used market for an Omega Speedmaster reduced. And one thing we must say, it's a great affordable way to add an iconic watch to your collection without, you know, spending an extreme amount of money for a luxury piece. They still are undoubtedly one of the best value bang per buck luxury watches on the used market. Okay guys, so those are my 5 loves. Now let's share my 5 hates. And it's always very difficult doing the hate because it's such a strong word. I don't really hate it, you know, but let's just say profound dislikes or mild annoyances. It's too long for the title of the video, but anyway. So number 1, and it's a very simple one, and it's got to do with the bezel. Now I love the shape of the bezel, the little insert there, the curvature of the glass, but because it's slightly raised and it sits a little bit taller than the rest of the case of the watch, it tends to catch on things, and it's the one part of the watch that attracts the most little dings and scratches and little dents. There's a few on this particular one. Now, I don't mind scratches that much because I think it adds character. However, because it sits a little bit higher up, it's very noticeable, especially when you get a big dent in there. It kind of breaks the outline of the bezel. Because it's quite thin, you tend to see the little dents a little bit easier. And it's something not just exclusive to the reduced. It's the same with all Omega Speedmasters because they all have that similar kind of lip raised section for the bezel. Okay, that was number 1. Number 2 has got to be the clasp. Now the newer reduced, the 3539, upgraded with a really cool push button clasp similar to the ones you find on an Omega Seamaster. And actually the newer Speedmasters as well. However, most Speedmasters have the older stamped clasp. It's held in just by a little bit of resistance. There's no button, there's no mechanism there. It's very, very dated. I'm scared that it's gonna pop open every so often. It bends out of shape very easily. Just look at some of the Rolexes from the 80s and earlier. Terrible, terrible clasp, even up into the 90s. So it's not a fault of this particular watch, but I have to say I'm not a fan of the clasp. Now, funnily enough, I do love the bracelet. It has this kind of president style bracelet with like 5 links. It's done very, very well, and it's very kind of silky and comfortable. So the bracelet I love. I just hate the clasp. I really don't like the clasp. Okay, so that was my second hate. My third hate has got to do with, and this is just exclusive to the Speedmaster reduced, and that is the placement of the pushers slightly above the crown. It's not immediately noticeable, but the way the crown sits just below, it would have been nice if it was perfectly horizontal, but I understand it's got to do with the construction of the module placed on top of the main movement. It just detracts from the finesse a little bit. It's not really that noticeable on the wrist, but you know, you do notice it. Okay, so that was number 3. Number 4, pet hate of the Speedmaster is the way the subdials are laid out on the main face of the watch. They're pushed out towards the outer edge of the dial. While I don't mind it too much, it has a certain charm, definitely lacks the aesthetic perfection of the Speedmaster Professional, or even the first Omega Space I owned previous to this. It's more clean, it's more balanced. I think actually with the 3510 reduced, because of the addition of those numerals, it's not so bad. It kind of differentiates a bit more from the Professional. But with the 3539, they cleaned up the dial and it's more apparent because those Arabic numerals are not there. At the end of the day, it really is subjective to your tastes, but I do feel it lacks the finesse and it does detract a little bit from the aesthetics and balance, certainly compared to the Professional. Okay, so that was number 4. Number 5, it's not actually a hate of the watch, it's more of a hate of how they are perceived. There's always this snobbery towards the reduced, this kind of looking down at it. It's not a real Speedmaster. Really? Well, it's got Speedmaster written on the dial. I mean, it's made by Omega. Who else made this watch, you know? But I understand it's a snobbery because it's not the one that went to the moon and all the rest of it and blah blah blah. Yes, it's not the manual wind, hasn't got the 321, blah blah. I've heard it a million times. But listen, this is what fundamentally it comes down to. If you are saving, if you want the Professional and you're saving towards it, you get to a point where you've got $1,500, $2,000. You think, oh, you know what, I'll just get the reduced. I say keep saving. Only go for the reduced if it fits your scale and size, and if the Professional looks silly on your wrist, then by all means go for the reduced. That's what it's there for. It's not there to provide a replacement or to be a superior watch. It's an automatic smaller alternative to the Professional. That's what it's there for. I think people get confused. They think it's some kind of cheap imitation. No, it's an alternative. Okay, so let's get that straight. And guys, I've said this a million times before. Snobbery. Look at the etymology of the word. Snobbery. It comes from the Latin sin nibolante. That means without nobility. So if you're being a snob, that means it's not a very refined, it's not an attractive trait in a person whatsoever. So always remember that. You've got to look at it as a watch in its own right, as an alternative to the Professional. It's starting to get recognized a little bit more, especially the limited editions, which is really great to see because I think they're going to be highly sought after very soon, especially as, you know, they're not making any more of the reduced, so inevitably the price will go up as they become rarer to find a really good example. Okay guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. So that was my top 5 loves and loathes of the Omega Speedmaster Reduced. Don't forget to add your thoughts, queries, comments, opinions, all the rest of it down in the comments. I love hearing your feedback, especially your own 5 loves and loathes or hates of the Speedmaster Reduced. Thank you very, very much for watching. Please don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and found it useful. And as always, I will catch you in the next one. Okay, ciao.